For the first equation, if you look at the problem that's up there, can you write the slope-intercept form of that equation? Okay, so we have y equals mx plus b. Okay. So if you look at your general form, okay, what can we replace b with? That's pretty easy to find. What is our y-intercept? 1, 2, 3. Here's our y-intercept. So we know that this is y equals mx minus 3. And we can also replace the slope. And we can do that by counting rise over run. So what's the rise between the 2 points that we see here? We go up 3, and we go over how many? Negative 4. So a positive 3 over a negative 4 gives you an overall slope of negative 3/4. So just by looking at that diagram, okay, you should be able to come up with your equation for the line. Okay, let's say we go to the second part. Okay, now we want to write the equation of the line that passes through point A that is perpendicular to the given line 1. Okay, so on this, okay, when you're looking at this, do we know what, again, we're going to start with mx plus b. Do we know what one of these variables is, either m or b? What's the relationship between the slopes when you have perpendicular lines? Opposite and reciprocal. So what is the negative reciprocal of this slope? Good, positive 4 over 3. So we found our slope. How can we find the corresponding y-intercept for this graph here? You guys remember the steps?
Why is it 4 over 3?
It's the negative reciprocal of the slope it's perpendicular to. Any ideas on this?
Do you use the slope here as well?
Nope. You're going to use this form here. What do we know? What values in this equation do we know for this blue line? Okay. We know b is going to be up here somewhere. We don't know exactly where. It's about 3, right? It's somewhere going to be close to that if this sketch is anything to scale. But do we know any of these? Do we know x and y?
Yes.
Eddie? Yeah. We have a set of coordinates, right? So this should be negative 2 here. Okay, so negative 2, 2 is one set of coordinates that we know are contained on that line. So what we can do to solve for this b value is we can take this equation, y equals 4/3 x plus b, and solve or plug in the two values that we know. We know the y value is 2 right here. It's given. Is equal to 4/3, and then we know the x value. The corresponding x value is negative 2. Okay, and now we can solve this. So if we do this by hand, just multiply this through. 2 times a negative 2 times a 4 is negative 8/3 plus b. So we're going to add 8/3 to both sides. Well, when you're adding fractions, it's easier to add them when you have denominators that are the same. So can we rewrite the value 2 in terms of the fraction thirds? 2 is how many thirds? So 2 is equivalent to what number over 3? 6. Okay? So 6/3, if we think in this term, what it allows us to do now, if we're adding 8/3 to both sides, to isolate our b value, 6/3 plus 8/3 gives you a total of 14/3. And so that winds up being, and you can just leave it as an improper fraction. You don't have to mix it, but you wind up with your y-intercept. Now, is that relatively consistent with what we would expect based on our sketch? Yeah, it's above 2, we know that. And so 4 2/3, almost 5, between 4 and 5, that's consistent with this sketch. Again, assuming that it's not drawn to scale because it's a hand sketch. Okay, so here's our equation for the perpendicular to that line. So we could also come through and find an equation for a line that's parallel to line 1 that passes through this given point B. If we do that, we can start our equation with y equals mx plus b once again. Okay, this time, do we know what our slope is? When lines are parallel, what's the relationship between their slopes? They're the same. So what slope is this going to have? 4/3 or negative 3/4? It's parallel to line 1, so we have to go back to line 1. So it's going to have the same slope, negative 3/4 x plus b. And so how do you think we're going to solve for this b? Going to do the same exact thing, right? We're going to take our equation, y equals negative 3/4 x plus b. Do we know our x and y coordinates here? Here's our y, negative 3 is equal to negative 3 over 4 times, here's our corresponding x, 2. And so now we can solve for our b. Multiply these through, or again, if you can simplify your fraction, it may be easier. 2 goes into 4 twice, so you get negative 3/2 plus b. Okay, so along the same lines, when we add 3/2 to both sides, it may be easier to think of negative 3 in terms of halves. So how many halves is negative 3? What number over 2 will give you negative 3? Negative 6. So when we add 3/2 to both sides, we get our y-intercept to be negative 6 over 2 plus 3 over 2. What does that give us? Negative 3/2. Okay. So here is our y-intercept. Minus 3/2. And let's see, is that consistent? Does it look like it passes through about negative 1.5? Now it's even more consistent with our diagram. Okay. So these would be your equations based on that given information.